Yeah. Welcome, Prime Minister.
Oh, thank you very much, Mayor Ali. That is incredibly kind of you. Kia ora, everybody. And before we get underway, can I introduce Giselle, who's Water Safety Officer, Water Services Officer from Dunedin, who regularly deals with council. So she's there to answer the questions that I can't, which will probably be most of them. So Mayor Tamer, I'm in your hands. Do you just want me to fire away with the presentation?
Yes. No, I think you can. I think everybody in the room here knows who you are and where you are and what you're up to, and we're keen to hear more. Thank you.
Probably less need for introductions than there usually is. Shall we just put it that way? Now, hopefully you can see on your screen, if I can just make it, is that a full screen for you or only a part screen that has a...
Wayne's just working on it. We've got a new system.
Good, because I've never seen this system on Teams before, so I'm making it up as I go along as well.
I'll let you know that we can see it.
I can see it. You just need to make it full.
Is that at my end or your end, Wayne? I'll tell you what, it might be at my end. How about that?
Yeah, that's it. Yep, beauty.
Okay, now all I've got to do is figure out how to get back to the right screen without doing anything silly. Okay, so look, how did Taumata Arawai get here? What are we on about? And for particularly your 4 new council members, this will be, hopefully, a very useful. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm seeing not what I'm meant to be seeing. So I'll go this way. Right. So for your 4 new councillors, hopefully this will be incredibly helpful. And for those of you who have been a while, this will still be a good refresh with some new stuff at the end of it. So the Water Services Authority, Taumata Arawai, we've been created as a result of the Havelock North water incident, which happened now 10 years ago. And one of the things I want to really give you from this conversation is that, yeah, it was 10 years ago and things have got better, but we've still got a way to go. Now, you should be seeing a bit of a log cabin on the screen now. Whistle out if you're not. That's it. Is that there? Perfect, right up. So that's a camping ground in Canterbury. Now, and it's not on a council supply, it does its own supply. And as part of doing that, like many private suppliers around the country, it supplies E. coli tests on a regular basis. And E. coli, for those who don't know, is a bacteria, and it is what's called an indicator species. So what it indicates is that there's fecal material in the water. So if you've got E. coli, you've got feces in the water, you've probably got a whole lot of other bugs. So it's used scientifically because it's easy to identify in supplies. Some of the other bugs are harder, but it tells you you've got poo in your water, basically. Now, back in September 2025, this camping ground unfortunately got E. coli in the water. Quite often E. coli is not terribly harmful, but it comes in many shapes and sizes. And the type that was at this camping ground, unfortunately, was one of the nasty ones. A camp of school children came through, and a lot of them got very, very sick as a consequence of drinking the water. A number, 6 in fact, wound up in hospital, and one wee tot was in hospital for 10 days, which you know how sick you have to be in hospital for 10 days now. So this is just to illustrate that Havelock North was not an isolated incident. This still happens, and yes, this is not a council supply, but every time an E. coli notification gets triggered through lab testing, the labs report it to us. So we get a list every week of what's going on around the country. And I can tell you that last week there were 43 E. coli notifications across New Zealand, and that 2 of them came from council supplies. So that's 43 times that poo was detected in water, and 2 of those times came from council supplies. Generally, what I want to emphasise too is that's just a tiny snapshot. That's not every supply in New Zealand being tested, because you only get tested every 3 or 6 months or whatever. So that is still an awful lot of a problem, and it's a problem that we're working our way on continuously here at Taumata Arawai to make better. I guess if there's one thing I'd like councillors, particularly new councillors, to take away from this, is that we have a philosophy in New Zealand, a little bit of our She'll Be Right culture comes in, that we've got the best water in the country. And I've heard that from people in Central Otago, obviously, in my time as mayor. Why are we needing to treat this water? It's the best water in the country. Well, look, the fact of the matter is that all sorts of things can cause fecal material to get in the water. You've had ducks at Bendigo. Some of you might recall that. there's any number of ways it can happen, and this is why we're here, to making sure that it doesn't get from the source water into the drinking water. So how do you make sure that happens? You look after your source water. The better your source water, the lower the cost, generally speaking. And of course, it was an unprotected borehead that was a big hand to play in the Havelock North disaster when sheep feces got into the aquifer. You then filter the water. Filtration will get rid of a lot of the harmful pathogens. It will also, particularly in the case of surface water, make available for disinfection the water. It'll remove a lot of the turbidity in the water, so that the chlorine can attach to the bugs and kill them instead of attaching to particles of dirt and running out, or the UV light, the UV filter, can get through and destroy the bugs, make them unable to replicate. And then secure distribution, and this is the bit under the ground that people forget about. That's your pipe network. You need to have what's called residual chlorination in the pipe network if you have centralised treatment, so that the water at the last tap of that network is as safe as the water at the first tap of the network or at the treatment plant, because every pipe network leaks to a greater or lesser extent, and if you have a drop of pressure while you've got a leaking pipe, the dirt, the pathogens, etc. can get in. That's why the chlorine, residual chlorine, is required. So we talk about multi-barrier protection when it comes to drinking water. I've talked about chlorination. That's one form of protection. It will kill bacteria such as E. coli. It will kill viruses such as norovirus, and it'll kill, what it won't kill is protozoas such as Cryptosporidium. So those who are in the room for a while will remember what happened in Queenstown a couple of 3 years ago. That was a Cryptosporidium outbreak. You need UV barrier protection to deal with that. And that's why, and you'll be familiar with the Cromwell plant, with Ranfurly and Patearoa, there was a requirement for UV protection to be put in, because those plants weren't actually actively stopping protozoas. They were dealing well with the bacteria and the viruses, but not the protozoa. That's the barriers that need to be in place to stop all those bugs getting through. And then another barrier with the residual chlorination. Now, you will probably, as elected members, as I did, have people say to you, the blimmin', the standards are too high, they're gold plating it, etc., etc. So I'll give you an anecdote or a way of dealing with that, and it's really simple. You just ask people what number of E. coli or what number of norovirus or what number of Giardia is acceptable to them, and I haven't found anybody yet who doesn't say, well, I don't want any of them. Well, all the standards are doing is making sure we don't have any of them, and the only way to lower them any further is to say, well, we'll let all the bacteria through, and we'll only worry, or I guess the protozoas. That's why we've got the UV barriers in. And pretty quickly that argument of the standards are too high, it simply dissolves, because if you don't want bacteria, if you don't want virus, if you don't want protozoa in your drinking water, when your kids or your elderly relatives or whatever are having a drink of water out of the tap, then those are the barriers that have to be in place. There's no gold plating. It's just pretty simple science. Okay, so what are we expecting from councils? Comply with the rules or an acceptable solution. I'll talk about acceptable solutions momentarily. Fully comply with the standards. Respond promptly to safety risks with appropriate action. So that's where you get a bit of a rain out in the Maniatoto and you put a boil water notice in place because the turbidity's got up in the Salburn, and your chlorination's just not going to work. Maintain robust risk management plans and demonstrate progress towards resilience. And what we're expecting from council supplies by 2028 is that you will be much more resilient to disruptions, many less boil water notices. That's across the country. When I say you, I mean councils, not just CODC. So what can you expect from us? Across the whole drinking water sector, it's a proportionate response. So on the one hand, if you're operating a council supply and you've got a situation like Havelock North, there were 5,000 people got sick there. If one valve had been flicked, it would have been Hastings as well, and it would have been 50,000 people. The bigger the supply, the greater the risk. So we do have to be very tough on council supplies, but the good thing is council supplies are generally down in that voluntary space. They're doing the right thing. We're monitoring with minimal intervention. Look, it generally tends to work well. But something that I want to point out to councillors is a risk that it used to keep me awake a bit at night when I was mayor as well, is as you go up that pointy bit, you're starting to get into territory where people are trying to do the right thing, but it's not really working out for them. That can be your private supplies, your small supplies, your mixed-use rural supplies around the district, all the way up to where people are just simply not doing the right thing. It's fallen to pieces. And last year we had this situation in Kaio, which was a small private water supply in the far north district, where they'd been on a boil water notice for 10 years, and for the sort of the last couple of months before we intervened, depending on who you talk to, there wasn't water coming out of the tap to even boil. It was a pretty hopeless situation, and we had to step in after many discussions with both the supplier and the council and actually have the council take it over. And that's, for me when I was mayor, and for you as councillors now, is something that you want to be aware of, because every single one of you are in that room because you are good community people. You're the eyes and ears of the community. You know what's going on in that place probably better than anybody. So what I ask of you is, if you get word that a certain supplier is struggling, be it, their equipment struggling, or there's a few that I can think of where, frankly, the people there's not a succession plan for the people who are operating them, and they've had a bit of enough of doing it. If you hear about that, encourage those people to please get in touch with us, because while we're pretty tough on councils because there's that big risk, in the space of the smaller suppliers, we really want to get in there and help them. It might sound odd, a regulator wanting to help, but we do. We're from Wellington, we're here to help. But we really do. And I imagine your staff would be in the same position too. They will hear about things. Please encourage these people to get in touch with us so that we can help them. It's a pretty important aspect as we try to get the whole country under safe drinking water. We've got a small but mighty team that works in that space, going out and helping the mixed-use rural supplies. Marae, Kayanga, Marai's not going to be a matter in Central Otago, and so forth. So they'll come in generally via Zoom rather. They'd love to get in the plane and come down and help those small supplies. They've got to be compliant if they're serving over more than 25 people by November 2030, so we'll give them some help. Drinking water quality assurance rules, I'm only touching on these for completeness because you may have staff in the room and they'll be aware that we did a consultation on these towards the end of last year, and just letting you know, there was only some tweaking in the consultation. That's still been worked its way through. The acceptable solutions I mentioned, this is where, instead of having centralised treatment like you do, say, in Clyde, dealing with Clyde and Alexandra, where everybody gets the water treated and it goes to their taps, this is a different method where you will have the water gets put together in a reservoir or a tank or whatever, and then it goes to the houses and it gets treated at the houses rather than at centralised treatment. And a lot of your mixed-use rural schemes, a lot of your irrigation schemes down home, that's how they operate. Now, what I want you to take away from this is that we made changes to these in September last year that make them easier to operate, cheaper to operate, and with a lot more practical how-to resources. So if you've got an irrigation scheme that is aware that, hey, it's supplying water to a lot of houses along the way, it kind of knows in the back of its mind somewhere its operators know that it needs to be compliant, but it's struggling a bit, get them to have another look at it, because they might have looked at the original acceptable solutions and gone, too costly, too tricky, don't want a bar of it. We've made it a whole lot easier. And again, if it's difficult, get them to get in touch and we'll talk them through things. And Giselle and her folk are there to help in that area as well. Okay, updating folks who were councillors last year or last term. We did last year consult on, and on the 19th of December, so just in time for Christmas, came into effect New Zealand's first national wastewater standards. So what we had up until these coming in were different standards right across the country. And I used to scratch my head as to why I'd talk to mayors in other parts of the country and they were going to be able to do things with wastewater that I was told I wasn't going to be able to do in Central Otago. Well, now there's no more of that. There are standards that are nationally the same. So you have the same as, say, Cambridge, which was often cited. When it comes to a discharge to water, and I know you've got your Alexandra consent coming up in the not too distant future when you're talking about infrastructure, what happens now is, instead of before we had to work through the regional council and work out what was going to happen, now you as a council will decide the type of receiving body. So is it going to be water? Is it going to be land? If you choose it to be water, then there's 9 different types of water bodies. So you have open ocean. Obviously, with the Clutha Mata'ao, it's going to be a large river because they don't come any bigger than that in New Zealand. So the large rivers have the different standards that you have to meet as a council if you're going to discharge into that water body. And I couldn't tell you the numbers, but say E. coli is one of them, there'll be a certain number that you have to get your standard to, and various other ones along the way. If you can achieve that standard, then the regional council or whatever comes in the regional council's place can't actually say, hey, we don't think that's high enough. That's what the standard is. It's not a maximum. It's not a minimum. That's the standard for those that are listed there. Small wastewater treatment plants, they have a different discharge requirement because they've often got really, really low flows. The other thing to note is if you get a resource consent using this, it's a 35-year consent. There isn't a room for the regional council to say, oh, well, that's going to be a 7-year consent or whatever. Discharge to land standard, same thing, but it talks about the different land types rather than the different water bodies receiving the discharge. Reuse of biosolids, this is where you can treat the sludge that comes out of your plant to a preset standard, and then you can use it, or even, as New Plymouth has been for many years, sell it and make money, which is very useful. And overflows and bypasses, I'm just saying that they've come in, been passed legally, but they don't come into force till the 19th of December 2028. One more slide till we get to the questions, which is the fun stuff. These 2 reports on the left-hand side of your screen, these are gold. They really are. And I tell you when they'll be even more gold for you guys sitting in that room is when you're operating under your CCO, your Southern Waters model, because what they give you is basically an overview of the nation's water, both the drinking water in one and the Network Environment Performance Report, which looks at everything, including wastewater and a bit of stormwater. When you have those in front of you, you're able to see where you're sitting in comparison to the rest of the country. You'll be able to see where your CCO is sitting in comparison with the rest of the country. And as owners, rather than governors, at this stage as governors, but further down the track as owners, you'll be able to have the information in front of you to ask the appropriate questions. The compliance monitoring and enforcement strategy is basically the full version of what I've been talking about for the last, I think, about 15 minutes, which should leave about 15 minutes for questions, Mia Tamer. Just before I come to you though, Giselle, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, team, thank you. I think you have covered everything very well.
Excellent. Okay, Tamer, I'm in your hands.
Good job. Questions?
Yeah, Tim, Stu here.
G'day,
A lot of still in the small rural schemes, talking 3 or 4 houses off a stockwater scheme, or those guys are still really twitchy about having responsibility for supplying. And I know of one where they're not supplying, and it's a family sort of breakup situation where subdivision where there's not a lot of access to water. How's that? Is it just going to settle down there? A lot of people say, it's not my responsibility. I'm not going to supply water where I used to do that because I'm in the gun being the main supplier.
Yeah. Look, a couple of things. Firstly, you remember back when the Water Services Act came in 2021, and we were told if you're 1 + 1 = a water supply. So if you've got a farmhouse, it's got a tank on the roof, or not down, but let's say a tank on the roof, and it's supplying the farmhouse and the manager's house, suddenly that's a water supply. Look, a bit over the top really, and I think we all thought it was at the time. An amendment was made last year so that you'll now have to be serving 25 or more people before you're captured by the regulation. So those 4 houses probably, depending on how many people are living in them, aren't going to be captured by the regulations now. We still want to encourage them to provide safe drinking water, and they can look at our website, and we've refreshed the website, and there's much better guidance there for that. But they're not going to be captured by the regulation. Now, if there's a bigger conglomeration, and I'm off the top of my head thinking Cambrian, somewhere like that, I know I had a bit to do with that when I was down there, where you probably are going to be topping that 25. Let's think about
Danzies Pass, St Bathans.
Yeah, Danzies, St Bathans, or Te Rehua. I mean, there's a number of them. That's where the new acceptable solutions come in. So the old acceptable solutions that were in place for about 3 years before September, they had that every house on it had to have a whiz bang endpoint treatment unit that would essentially stop, or alarms would go off, or a whole lot of stuff would happen if the filters were not functioning right, or if the UV lamp had reached the end of its life, and all those bells and whistles cost a whole lot of money. So they were sort of a starting point of $10,000 each. And that was one of the things that made people go, well, I'm not touching a bar of that. So we looked at that and went, that's a bit crazy. If you're running a cafe or something like that, yeah, absolutely, you're going to need something like that. But if it's just a house, you should surely be able to rely on people to take care of themselves a bit. So one of the big changes that came in was that if a scheme wanted to, or needed to put in the endpoint treatment units, for the domestic supplies, they could put in much cheaper ones, where the onus became on either the supplier or the people living in the house to change those filters and to change that lamp that does the UV treatment. And the cheaper ones will have a little light that will shine if it's needing to be changed, but it's not going to have a piercing alarm to tell you, and 28 different sensors to double check. So we've made it in much cheaper. Sort of $10,000 is now down to about $1,200. That's not fitted, but still, for safe drinking water, it's much more affordable. And the other thing we've done is, as I said, we've refreshed the website, so there's much better guidance on how to do it, and we've changed the onus for, a supplier can now put the onus on the householder rather than taking it on themselves. So just so much easier. And I've got to say that coming from a rural place, I had a voice to say in this, and was able to have a bit to do with it. Get these folks to come and talk to us, Stu. In fact, if you want, give them a number. You've still got it, and I'll talk them through it, because it is just so much easier, and people don't need to get twitchy now, I don't reckon.
So what about a Turuhua, where it's gone bigger than that, but I'm not sure they understand, and there's still developments going on there. Like a Turi was one that fitted perfectly in the Barry Becker days.
Yeah.
And then now it's become a water scheme, but it's not a part of our water scheme. And who takes that discussion on for those sort of towns?
Yeah, well, it's going to be up to, in the first instance, up to the people who are currently operating the scheme, and I'm not sure who it is now that Barry's no longer with us. I imagine it's Ken Gillespie, isn't it? He does everything out there.
Yeah, they've got a group. They've got another couple of guys running the organisation, but yeah.
Look, if the first stop, if they want some help in what they need to do, we'll get them to get in touch with our that small but mighty team that I put up, and they'll talk them through it. How many houses in Aotearoa now? Sort of 30.
Yeah, easy. And of course, because of the water, and there's unlimited amount of water, there's a whole lot of new subdivisions or new houses going in. So the water's created the growth, but actually it's...
And
So Tim, sorry. So Tim Tracy here. How are
Tracy? You? Yeah, good.
Julie has mentioned that, is it July, June, there's going to be, we have to report, council has to report on what we know in relation to that information. I'm presuming that is something that we would have to pass on to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. That report that the whole country's having to do is the start of us, well, not the start of us, it's another step in us trying to find where all these little schemes are, and across the country, it's a really difficult task, and it's not an easy task for the councils. We totally appreciate that, but who else is in a position to do that? Stu, I think when we're talking about Aotearoa with the continued growth, and a caveat that I'll put on the endpoint treatment units is, firstly, that they don't shine. They're not at their best with surface supplies, particularly turbid ones, and you might want some centralised treatment to settle the water down. But secondly, if there's areas of growth, it can be a bit off-putting for people thinking of moving to this idyllic country lifestyle to find out they can't just turn the tap on and have it done. So that'll be a discussion for the council and a discussion for the scheme out there. But I think the scheme in the first place should get in touch with us if they've got their concerns. And I genuinely mean it. I sit next to the guy who runs our community supplies team. Absolutely great fella. I think he played for the All Blacks. He tries to tell me that he did, but there's no proof of it. But he's a great bloke, and he'd get on well with the team at Aotearoa and help them through those initial discussions.
Additional questions?
With the regulatory body, what's going to happen to Wellington Water? And is there a liability where that's prosecution? Or have you got teeth in that front, or is it just because it's Wellington it goes away?
Oh, hell no. Well, look, that's not our gig. Our place is drinking water and setting the national wastewater standards for breaches of compliance in the wastewater space. That still sits with here, the Greater Wellington Regional Council. It's a really sad and terrible situation. The only good thing is that it's perpetually, I find, too cold up here to go swimming anyway. So.
Because I guess that was a frustration with the protozoa treatment in Patearoa. We had boil water notices because we weren't compliant. Then you watch on TV and there's 2 or 3 treatment plants that are failing, and you don't see too much publicity from the government or from Te Mararawai about breaches. But you felt pretty lonely, I guess, in the election cycle when we were getting hammered by the government in water, and people standing up saying, "Well, we've got boil water notices in Naseby, Ranfurly, and because you haven't got protozoa treatment," even though it was underway. It felt a bit relentless pressure.
Yeah, look, there came a point where we had to say enough's enough, and it was right across the country that these schemes that were at risk of protozoa, something needed to be done. And what happened in Queenstown, what are we now, 2 years ago, was really the jolt that made it, okay, we can't just sit here and say that we'll do it one day. It's got to happen now. And some managed to get the protozoa barriers in time. Others had to put those boil water notices in, and unfortunately, you guys fell on that side of the ledger. But at the end of the day, the water was perfectly safe until it wasn't. And people would say, well, there's nothing wrong with it. But unless you've got those barriers in place, you can't be sure of that. And of course, any amount of testing you do, you're only going to find the problem a day later when people have got sick. So, yeah, tough when it comes to the prosecutions of whatever's happening in Wellington. Look, I don't know, out of my wheelhouse, but right at the moment, I do know that everyone's running around like crazy trying to fix the problem, and the inquiries and the repercussions will come later, and they're not in our lane. It's not our
Another
gig.
question is, it's like a sinking lid policy in a lot of the government entities. Is there anything else that's going to come down the line in 4 or 5 years' time for like the small rural water schemes, or that we don't know of yet, that becomes out of really clever ideas after a think camp in Wellington?
Look, yeah, I don't think so, but that's down to the government. We just enforce the regulations that the government comes out with. The thing that I do take a great deal of hope from is that there's much more agreement in this space than people generally give credit for. So when it comes to the drinking water standards that were brought in 2021, they had a cross parliament agreement to them, except for 2 of the major parties went, look, we think that 1+1 farmhouse farm manager scenario that I talked about is excessive. So that was the one thing that caused them, as I understand it, to vote against it. So there's cross-party support for where we've got the standards now, even in 2026, for drinking water. The other thing I take solace from is the current opposition has said, hey, local water done well is done. We don't think it was as good as what we had. Doesn't matter. We're not going to roll it back. So I think we're starting to get into a much more steady space now. Big changes were brought upon us by those deaths in Havelock North. It's taken a while to work through them, and then the political ramifications of the costs of doing that are still being worked through. But the actual levels themselves that came out of Havelock North when it comes to the drinking water, they haven't changed.
Any other questions? Last thoughts? Anybody want to say bye, Tim?
Actually, I wonder, Tracy, I gave you a wave when I passed you on the gorge on, I think it was Saturday. I might have been, I can't remember. It was Monday, actually, but I was in my son's car, so you wouldn't have had a clue. But if you wondered who that was me.
I didn't see
Didn't
that.
recognise
She'll be
you without your
speaking
purple
anyway.
jelly bean.
She was late.
She was going big
She was racing.
Yeah,
But it was,
So
Brought it risk, you're on it.
it was lovely to be down there and see the place looking so well. And look, it's been great coming and living in a city for a while, but my God, it's getting harder to get on the plane every time. You live in a beautiful place and keep doing the great
You
job
come
that
back
you're
one
doing
day
with
if you're
it.
lucky.
Well, yeah, if you have me back.
Finger and stood
No.
in the by-election if it was all.
No, we really
Oh.
appreciate your time, Tim and Giselle, and having those contact numbers. I know I've let a number of our local operators have Tim's number for him to call them directly, because we do have quite a lot here and in Waitaki, because I've spoken to my parents about it as well, where you've got 75-year-old men with cancer running the system, and there's no backup plan and no succession planning, and people just kind of think that, you know, John or Barry is going to keep going forever. So do have some risks around our community and others where we're really reliant on one person knowing everything. And that's going to become quite a lonely place for some of those schemes. So if we can get them the support from TA now via him, that's really, I think, quite helpful. And the rest of your team as well, Tim, which is great to have their details.
Yep, absolutely. Just get in touch anytime.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Giselle.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Wayne,
you.
for setting it up. Lovely to see everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Next up.
We can roll through the floor.
Well, it's now, and I feel like it might make for a while.
You want to stand up and stretch your legs and go coffee and.
Yeah, it's gonna take 2 or 3 minutes just to.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I know
Deja vu, welcome. I see we're here to talk about the Cromwell Town Centre.
Yeah.
But
It
that's
does
cool.
feel like deja vu, doesn't it?
Here we are. Here we are.
Perfect.
Thank you, Your Worship. And do we have people online, Wayne? Have we got a couple of community?
And it's going to join any minute now.
Any minute? Great. Cool. All right. So for the next hour and a half, does everybody know Gareth and Bex? Gareth's our property and facilities manager. Bex is one of our project managers. And we've got a few staff and stuff in here as well. But over the next hour and a half, we're going to go through the Cromwell Town Centre project, and really with the community board and council go through sort of some of the work that's been done so far to get everybody on the same page and up to speed with kind of where things are, with an outcome of, I guess, getting some direction from community board and council here for us to put a paper to the next round of the community board and to come through to council as well around the next steps of the project and what that might look like. There is some money in the LTP, and just to bring everybody up to speed from who is new to the project, this was in the current LTP that we're in right now, and just given the time that the hall has taken to come out of the ground and the change of scope of that hall, the community board and council at the time decided to move this project out to the 2730 LTP, and so that money's sitting in there where the funding comes available from 2027 through to 2030 as a 3-year project. And so I guess our goal as staff is to understand that direction and to get the resolutions from this table and the community board around what that LTP spend and planning will look like. We do obviously only have around about 6 to 7 months to do this work until it goes out for consultation, until the paperwork needs to be done, go into the consultation to go out early next year. So I'm not sure if Anna was hoping to be online. She's just having some connection issues. She is online.
Yeah.
Did you hear any of that, Anna? Would you like to add anything to that?
I heard all of that, or most of that. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank you for setting up this meeting. I'm really sorry I can't be there today. The nature of schools at the beginning of the year is that they can be hard to get back out of once you've arrived for the day. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to get on the same page as a whole community of elected members from the Cromwell Community Board and the council to understand what the project scope might be, what the issues are for our community, and to think about solutions that mean that we've got a way forward that we're all comfortable with, I think is the main thing.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Now we have we've sent out some pre-reading, which was about 40 slides, which we've compressed down into about 14 slides. And the way we've done that is we've made some assumptions around the questions you might ask as we go through this. So each slide kind of starts with a question that we'll be answering and giving as much detail as we have to hand in the project so far. If there are questions that come up, feel free to ask them at the time. Otherwise, we'll spend probably half an hour going through the shortened version of that presentation, and then sort of 45 minutes to an hour just in, I guess, discussion and getting direction. That's something that Bex loves, to be able to get into a nice, neat, easy paper and get some resolutions and moving forward from there. So without further ado, Gareth's excited to get talking. I'll hand the talking stick to him, and him and I, and also there's a few staff in the room as well that will sort of bounce around as things come up too. So to you,
So
Gareth.
everyone knows I like to walk and talk, so you have to tune your face. Wayne, can you go to the next slide?
Oh, that's just.
We sent you some pre-reading 45 slides.
Actually, Gareth, just before we do start, all the councillors know community board members. I'm sure you've all sort of met, but we've got Mike Casey in the room, and then Wally, and we see Anna online, Sarah here,
Rebecca's away.
and Rebecca's away. She's an apology for us. Yeah, cool.
So we sent out the 45 slides. It's effectively from 2008 through to present, right? And it's about all the iterations this project has gone through. And like everything in life, it follows an evolution. So When we ended up on the last decision making for the council, we ended up presenting that, which was 9 options of what the town centre and surrounding CBD could actually look like. A lot of work went into this stuff, but it actually complicated it is a complex project, make no mistake in that, but this overcomplicated the situation. So we broke it down and we thought we'll simplify. So if we go next slide, Wayne. Where we started in 2008, moving all the way through here. And as you can see, the big decisions came out of the Cromwell Master Plan on actually getting the framework for this, and then going into the 2131 LTP. There was big decisions, right? So the council committed, and the board committed $73.5 million towards a hybrid project. So it was going to be the Memorial Hall, town centre running in tandem, the design phase of about a year for the Memorial Hall, 2 years for the town centre, and then subsequently going into construction phase. Memorial Hall took on its own sort of event, and we ended up increasing that level of service, increasing that project, and morphing it into something a little bit different. We then started focusing, and look, that took a lot of time because we was actually trying to get this milestone over the line and actually get moving with that project. We then started focusing on the town centre, and we had prior engagement with NMA Architects, which was they were engaged for the master plan. We hadn't ended engagement with them yet. So we decided to continue our work with them and move forward. During the 2131 LTP adoption, a pivoting decision was made, which actually changed the dynamics of the plan. And there was a bit of interest from the community saying, we would like to retain the library and the service centre. So that changed the dynamics of the master plan. And no fault of NMA, we set the direction for them saying, well, follow what the board and the council have decided for the LTP, and this is the direction we want you to go into. We ended up with a scheme plan, or there were 3 different options of 1, 1.1 and 2. And all of them, to be fair, looked at increasing the town square size. But those 3 plans all had the civic facilities on Barry Avenue in different variations. So one with an underground car park, one with non-underground, combined buildings, and they just used normal GFAs. So 1,000 square meters for the service centre, 1,000 square meters for the library. Then looked at the project and said, well, NMA have come to, they've delivered what we set them out to do in their first engagement. We now need to go out to market and look for new, well, either them or another set of architects. So who was going to win the tender? Gasmax came in on top. The first thing they did when they took the scheme plans, but then there's something wrong here and we want to introduce another option. And most of us have been involved in this project were a little bit gun shy and going, wow, you know, it's been so long to get it to this stage. Now you want to introduce another stage. But we allowed them to present through to the board and it was unanimous. So option X was born. So really small, but basically that is option X over here. So we're going to do the new terms of A, B, and C. So C is now the new piece, right? And it basically put the new civic facilities, which was the library and customer services, council offices, and potentially a commercial floor as well to get capacity done inside the town school. And all the science that was associated with that was saying that this is the best way to activate a town square, is to have that anchor tenant. And all the science points to having a bigger town square. So we were following all the rules of engagement when we did this. But associated with this project was an acquisition of between 7 and 8 buildings. The price tag associated with that was between $5 and $6 million. And effectively, be demolishing every single one of those buildings. So Sunken cost, well, sunken cost from a monetary point of view, benefit, my opinion, from benefits analysis for the town square being enhanced. So the benefit for community. That all got skewed in translation. So Wayne, I think you the next slide. And what we didn't do was actually ask these questions. Right? We just boxed on with a line of thought. We shouldn't have gone down that road. We should have actually pulled this project back. Should have asked the strategic questions. David termed it the North Star, and you'll see that's in our original slide deck. What is the North Star of this project? What are we aiming for? What is the purpose? Right? Like you also jumped onto that one, right?
That came to council. You just said it only came to the community board, but
Board and then council.
it came to us. Yeah, that's right.
Came to council. But it got
But jumbled.
absolutely jumbled, and there were a whole lot of figures being spoken about. They were in excess of hundreds of millions of dollars. And it wasn't explained. No one was coming along for the journey, and it wasn't explained properly and what that looked like.
And then when we asked about the costing of those buildings, we never had a valuation because the consultant didn't know what the cost per square metre were of some of those buildings.
So we ended up getting all of that, and that's where we sort of took between $5 and $6 million. But 100%, we should have been far more on top of it than what we
You're underdone. You're underdone big time.
Yeah. So we think, well, what's the purpose? And because I love AI, so that is AI, and it came up with that sort of, I don't know if Biggs modified that. So it came up with that, and I thought that's a really good sort of purpose. Now, we want a future-proof, a vibrant town. We want to grow. We want to be prosperous. We want a connection. We want activation. And Cromwell, I'll tell you that right now, is a drive-through centre. People bypass it. And I lived in Dunedin, used to work in Queenstown. I used to drive straight past Cromwell, right? There was nothing there that said, stop here. This is the place to be. And we've got so much going in that town that we actually need to create something that's going to cause people to stop. The ambitious approach. In the LTP submissions, there were people saying, pull the whole thing down, rebuild it. It's pretty ambitious, right? What complicates that scenario is private, public partnerships. You've got multiple owners in this centre that you've got to rally together, get consensus on, and then move forward. But I wind that back again. We still, because we weren't communicating correctly, we still didn't have the right direction, the council, to say, where should we be putting these civic facilities? Is that the road we go down, and are we committed to that? And if we're committed to that, then what do we need to do to make that happen? That'll come at the last slide. You'll see we've got critical questions and decisions that need to be made.
We did have a discussion about where to put it.
Yep.
Necessarily that it was the talked about incontendence back then, but we did talk about where to put it because there was the whole idea of potentially moving the civic services to another facility by the lake, and that wasn't agreed to, right? So it would, yeah.
Yep. So go next slide, please.
Now, I think to add to that, Gareth, through the process and earlier in the days, looking at the current facilities that were there, I think some people of the public came out saying that they're really valuable facilities and we'd like to look at the option of keeping them too. So there was probably a whole lot of different options and sort of narrowed down. And I think that's one of the things about moving through this next step is to understand all of the different options that are out there and see if we can start prioritising some of those things.
Yeah. So we'll wind back and I'll do a quick reminder of those of you a little bit familiar and those of you who aren't, this is a great learning curve. Those were the buildings that were up for acquisitions and they circa between $5 and $6 million. When we went to option C, we included an 8th building, which would be number 48 over here. because it occupies that floor area. Every single designer, every single architect has all agreed on one thing. Open up the town square to create a place for gathering and create sight lines. Because, so if you take those buildings out, there's a sight line running through there, sight line running through here, sight line running through there. The reason they do that is, number one is wayfinding. Number two, people can actually see the open spaces. Capitalize on our majestic mountains and views, right, from the town square. If you're in that town square now, you can't see anything. Absolutely get lost. And you think it's such a small place to get lost. How? But it actually happens. So, because we wanted to give options for choice, we kept the two original NMA options, which was best acquisitions using a different formula of buildings, and then keeping the service centre and the library in that space. Again, this is a different modification to the town square. And then we went in for option C, which was actually more ambitious, utilise all those buildings, plus build the hub in over there, and we're still retaining the service centre over here. But that building, because we own it outright and it's got good bones, could either be leased or sold, repurposed. But I don't think you would repurpose something like that. It's too valuable. So we set out a critical path now. We need the location of the civic facilities because we need a little bit of direction to move into the two. Town square, are we going to be acquiring buildings and opening up the town square, or are we not? Because it's a massive waste of time if we're not going to do it to actually go down that path. And unfortunately, from the private point of view, they've lost a bit of faith in us because we've gone down the negotiating route time and time again, and then we've ended up pulling back. Good cause though, to be fair. Barry Avenue. So if you're building civic facilities on Barry Avenue, I need to touch the town square, right? And what are we doing to that town? Are we killing it? There be no activation if we're building civic facilities and bury it. And do we look at alternative sites altogether? So because we're blank slating now, there's no rhyme or reason why we can't go, hey, maybe this is a dead duck. Let's move it somewhere else. Now's the opportunity. Now's the time we can ask the questions, and we can give that direction we need. Next slide, please, Wayne.
Just on that, where we are, Wayne, that there's a few things that we do know in here, that because Cromwell is a growing town, the town that's there was built, as we know, about 40-ish years ago, and it was built for a size town at the time, and we know now that our library gets about 60,000 people through the door every year, and it was first built, that was probably in 5 figures back then. We know that as a council we've grown, we have more employees, we've got centre offices and all of that kind of stuff up there as well. We have a full service centre there, as well as building a facility by the lake and a swimming pool close by. So we know that what's being serviced up there is working really, really hard for the size and the footprint that's being serviced through. And that's where just some of those stats up there, that using best practice, a library roughly 40 to 60% larger to meet the growing needs of population. The way people experience council now has changed over time as well. So we know that people are doing a lot more over one desk rather than going to lots of different places, different rooms and the flexibility of rooms. So rather than having just one place for people to come for a particular meeting, or maybe a mother's group meet in one particular place, lots of different groups are meeting within one building now. And we know we're seeing that sort of evolution in how communities work. And I guess there's some of the great learnings that we have had over the years in understanding how our buildings are being used and the evolution of how they're being used as well. So
a question there though is, in our existing community service area,
yeah,
is it big enough? And on that front, And I'm going to say we're going to have amalgamation in time and all those things. We've got regional council, and why aren't we having council meetings in Cromwell rather than Alexandra? If we have to build capacity, is there capacity in that model? If we haven't got capacity, are we limited?
So we put a little bit of science behind this. So this building that was proposed over here has actually been sized accordingly.
Accordingly for future growth.
Future growth.
Yeah, right.
But
Cool.
future growth based on there being a Central Otago District Council that carries out the current roles and functions.
Yeah.
And we even threw in a commercial floor.
Yeah.
So that we could cater for well into the future.
Yeah.
But also we weren't occupying the building. We've got passive income coming in.
Yeah. So that's in that plan, as in there's enough, you've got enough vision in there to pick that up.
And to your point, Your Worship, the sands have shifted a little bit around what does it mean for other councils working together, that kind of stuff as well. And probably a lens that we have to look at over the next couple of months with would it have capacity to grow amongst that if that was something that.
Yeah. Because that's been the thing that's been keeping me awake at night is if we all change.
Yeah.
And we're trying to make decisions now, we'll end up being another ORC. We're building a facility that all of a sudden may not be there, or are we building a facility to capture that?
Yeah, and I guess that's the important thing about a facility like this is making sure that it can be used in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And is really
It's the
flexible.
first cab off the rank, and then we'll get a bigger bite of the cherry.
Yeah.
That principle of opening up the town square and getting those lines of sight out sounds really, really good. But have they expressed, I don't know, with confidence that you could achieve that, given that you're still working with some of the dimensions? Especially through those east and west corridors, and even that one out to the south. I see that one out to the north will be a whole lot more. What do they feel confident it would do what they think it would do?
Yeah. So all science leads to that, and make no mistake. By knocking these buildings out, you're talking about a hell of a big remediation because all the frontages have to change. One of the new scheme plans, and I call it that's over here. They were talking about a new facility over there. So not actually taking the bigger part of the chunk out and then creating a new facility. But all of the science associated with that says it works. But like, I love being sluts, right?
Yes.
If someone said, hell, I'll put a bulldozer through there.
So still slightly experimental.
Yeah, 100%. Because that's what you got to work with. It's like remodeling a building, right? You never know if you're actually going to get what you want. You try your damnedest to get what you want. You're always constrained by whatever barriers are there. And that's exactly what that is.
So with those conversations, knowing that when you came to us last time, it was very muddly, and there's a lot of appetite not to be involved in the private enterprise, have there been discussions with them saying these are potential, what are you going to do? Because effectively, whatever we do will increase the rateable value or the value of the rest of the mall that is doing nothing to help itself. And that was the biggest sticking point for a while. There's all of a sudden Gary Anderson and Pinkney, are they willing to upgrade their facility, or else are we going to go on our own?
So I think I'm not going to answer for them, and I'd rather have them answer themselves. I think there is an appetite to improve that facility overall. I think majority, they were the MUG group, more users group and more owners group. They were all willing to participate. And I think we muddled the waters too much. Right? If I go to the next slide, I'll show you actually, Wayne.
Gareth, just before that, doing asbestos in these buildings, is there any reason to think would cost us a lot more?
Yeah, no, there's asbestos.
Right.
So the buildings have good bones, but the verified asbestos is the butanol on the verandas throughout the entire.
So it's safe at the moment, but.
So it deteriorates over time and it goes from a non-friable state to a friable state.
I've had a lot of asbestos from you recently.
Yeah. So that's at the moment you could probably remove it in situ and take the whole thing, bag it, get rid of it.
So I guess the follow-on question to that is, if there is asbestos, one is when we demolish those buildings, will do you have an idea of what the cost will be on the demolition? And second, how long is it before the rest of the buildings are in a state where we'd have to shut it anyway?
So, remember the rest of the buildings are all privately owned.
Yeah, but
So they would have to.
at some point if they're
manage their-
unsafe.
Yeah, they would have to manage that. I think from the cladding point, so I did a really high level look at the buildings. From the outside cladding, excluding the green, it's pretty safe. I haven't gone and dug into the buildings. Have done in our buildings. What I can say is there's asbestos paper in our roofs. But other than that, there's no asbestos.
As, I guess what I'm getting at is at some point in the future when we redevelop this more, do the other buildings that we don't own end up getting into a situation where we would have to shut them all down or we would have to pay more money to keep them all open?
Yeah, they become our liability.
Do they become our liability?
So, well, they don't because they're privately owned.
No, but if they
walk
is there a
away,
legal obligation that they have to
There
do
is
it?
a legal obligation.
And if they don't?
Well, so legally they have to put it, if they've got asbestos, they've got to put it onto a register. And then they've got to show every year that they monitor that register. And if it starts to deteriorate, then they have to actually remediate. So yeah, they are legally obliged to do it.
Because I just would hate that we redevelop more, that we have to shut it down for 6 weeks
But
because
to be fair, some asbestos that's in these buildings now will be good for another 150 years.
I think with it's got some good questions because it is a complex project and a complex model. And I think in this public workshop, being able to take some of these ideas and things away for us to be able to, I guess, deduce down and maybe set up some kind of group to get the steer from everybody else and what they're thinking too. In the short term, there is asbestos, throughout New Zealand and Tudor buildings, and it's actually rare for us to do any maintenance work or pull down a building that doesn't have some asbestos somewhere. Even an old building has likely gone through a renovation in a time when it was the product to use, And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people right across the construction industry are really conscious of, especially now, that things like, earthquake strengthening's changing, the abilities changing, all of that kind of stuff. And so the need to renovate buildings or any construction works in New Zealand is becoming more of a priority. And because of that, the dealing with asbestos.
So it's your guys' professional opinion that that would not be a reason to justify starting with a blank slate on this project somewhere else. Like the risk is low to the community that we would be in a position where we have to spend a lot more money remediating them, but we don't know.
I don't have enough information to hand on how the other buildings are sitting, but I think it is a really good conversation for us to have with the wider town centre community around, the potential thoughts around what that could be.
And to your point, if it ends up raising the rate of value, can we make sure that they sign something saying that they will certainly be keeping their buildings up to the required standard for the mall?
So that's the public-private partnership, right? And I think we stitched that together with them.
I mean, the risk, that was a big sticking point last time, is that they were not coming forward to say they were going to do stuff and enhance their part of it, and yet the ratepayer was going to subsidise the value of their whole mall. And then the leaning started going to the Northwest Precinct, because if you look at that minimum needs and divide fit, you could just build a whole new shopping centre on that frontage of Northwest Precinct. We owned all the land, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary Anderson was saying we might do a land swap and take some sell land at the back end, wasn't he? And then go to the Northwest Precinct for a land swap, which means he went straight out to the beautiful sunny part looking at the lake. And it's a bit like we're trying to develop.
So just to clear that quickly, they were unwilling sellers.
And we're just going to be really clear, we're in a public session here. And talking about individual business owners, what they are or are not willing to sell or do or swap is actually not our role here. It's to think about what we're wanting to do in this space.
Anyway, unwilling sellers, we approached them. So obviously deals are going to be stitched up in that respect.
I'll just chip in with it. I've got 12 pillars of success written down here, but the one I'll touch on first is that whatever we do, like setting a path, has to be scalable. So anything we do with pulling out a couple of buildings inside the mall is not scalable for when our population doubles. It's not a 2050 answer. So I would be embarrassed in 2050 if we just took it up the mall at this point, because when you think about the gross floor area in 2040 or 50, we're going to need 4 times as much, right? So in my mind, the current mall as we know it, is just going to be a precinct within a much bigger developed town centre.
I disagree slightly. So, GFA doesn't necessarily need to expand out. So they did look at the town's square sizing with those buildings as being future-proof for 50 years, right? Then you start looking at buildings housing different activities. Retail's changed, so whatever that bottom section does usually goes to hospo or high-end retail, and then you start going up into offices and residential, which is also an option. So I kind of think at the moment, Cromwell is expanding outwards, and that's the problem. You actually need to start condensing it back into a tighter knit CBD. So there's lots of, yeah.
That's why you're in there, yeah.
It's going to help your views of the mountains from the.
That's why you create lines of sight.
Sorry?
So you create lines of sight. It's spaces inside of the area that don't have any buildings occupying.
Yeah. The biggest problem with the mall, and I was associated with it just after it was completed. As soon as the people left Cromwell and went away after the completion of the dam, the mall died. Now, there's just been 2 businesses closing there, so there's no retail in there. And the only way you're going to get retail back in there is so make it possible for vehicles to get in there. And there's got to be parking. There's none of that. You go and look on any given day, apart from Sunday, you take a drive around the mall. The parks are full. Go into the mall and you might count 8 people. Got more likelihood of bumping into somebody down in Old Cromwell than what you do in the mall. I think we need to stop looking at the mall. We need to go beyond it. We need to head in the direction where the big fruits are, north to the main highway there. And there needs to be a ring of shops go around there and make it move that way. Put your civic centres down on Murray Terrace, down there, you've got a bit of land there. Go that way.
The thing that we've found with that in recent years is every time a town has turned and merged around a state highway, they have moved the highway because they actually don't want shops on either side of the highway and people.
I understand that because I was a part of that when they were trying to find a place to put it. But the thing is, you look at 5 Mile, what they've done there.
You turn off the state highway to go into 5 Mile.
Well, you're going to have to always turn off the state highway to come into Cromwell. Doesn't matter what you do. Like they're not going to allow them to go both sides of the highway. So what you do is you put up a thing that you've got, like a 5 Mile, but you do it in Cromwell, and leave the big fruit there. There's a lot of people take photos of that fruit. There's more people take photo of the fruit than what go into the library. If you could get some way of coercing those people that come to take photos of the big fruit and get them to walk beyond that and walk around the corners to cafes, restaurants, whatever, you could put 2-story shopping along there. Like you need draw cards, and that's what Cromwell hasn't got. Like you talked about doctors and dentists and that on McNulty Road. The reason they're there is this parking.
Oh, and there's also no space for them in the mall. Because all of the vast majority of the shops are only 1 story.
Yeah, but some of them move from there down to there. And that's the thing. The people, Cromwell is a service town. And
depending on who you talk to.
No, it's a service town. Been a service town for as long as I know. And it's all very fine to try and push it in another direction, but it's still, the mall has never worked like the old Main Street worked. You could pull up it's like Alexandra here. You can pull up outside your shop, get what you want and bugger off. And you can't do that in the mall. You couldn't do that when it was thriving because you had to push your barrow of groceries 150 metres. And people don't want to do that. So the only way, and you just end up with too much of a fight with the different property owners in the mall, that the easiest way is just make it standard.
But also going on from that, if you actually, you're right, Gareth. You know, people just drive past and they drive past because the Big Fruit Reserve is there. It's a barrier. Whether you like it or not, you're just not going to pull in. It's a great big barrier to stopping seeing what's available in Cromwell.
So what you're saying is you develop that northwest precinct and let the mall just be what it is
Yeah.
stay what it is.
Yeah, so like if you, yeah, just basically because he is going to end up.
You can see why the conversation a long time ago was exactly that discussion we're having right now.
I'll just add to that as well. It's one of the reasons why, yes, we haven't had a North Star. How do you want to feel when you're in the mall? Just to your point, Charlie, how do you stay there and have a coffee and buy some stuff and pop in to see the doctor and all of that kind of stuff? What is the feel of the town that you're after, you know? And that's one of the things that I think will really help move this project forward, is getting North Star. What is the ultimate goal in 40 or 50 years? What do we want our kids and grandkids saying about the town when they're in there?
I guess the busiest places are along the other side, not in the mall, on the outside of the mall, looking north. They're the ones that are busy.
Yeah.
No one in the.
No, the problem
wants
is.
to be there.
Where you draw card businesses are no longer in there. So like, there's not too many mums are going to push a pram into the library for the kids' toy library and then go around to the Mexican restaurant for tequila sunrises.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's exactly what the mums are doing.
Going to Mums and Bob's, you need a margarita.
Do we want to just keep working through? I think we've got a few more slides and we'll take that. It's a really good point. And
So I'm not going to read this slide, but you can see we're saying identify in public realm experience should define the future of the town centre. A whole lot of stuff in there, and it's all good stuff. But we need to actually get that direction.
Gareth, what does public realm mean?
That definition right there.
Ah,
We go to the next slide, please, Wayne.
public realm is sort of all things. Well, what are the sum total of all things within a town? It's kind of a nice, easy way that I.
Yeah. We're also going to talk about, associated with this, are the intersections. So currently, the road runs down like this, Murray Terrace. So we're talking about straightening out that. That creates a lot more GFA for commercial value. But in QP did the exercise with his team, it was identified, and unfortunately he's sick today, others here jump in, but all 4 intersections actually need to be upgraded. All 4 intersections are unsafe. So there could be an opportunity for different funding streams there, because they could put an application in and perhaps get government funding associated with it. So when we're looking at this, we're not just looking at the little isolation point, we're actually looking at the whole.
And that's come about through town growth too, you know, and the intersections of you used to be able to stop at the giveaway sign quickly and keep going. You've now got to wait for 4 cars in front of you kind of
I mean,
thing.
you have to stop.
Yeah.
It stops us.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Sides. We haven't got time for
So that intersection, we went that walk by a couple of years ago around there. That's right out there. So that gives more space for what?
Potential.
Buildings.
So we identified a whole lot of different activities.
So you're saying that is a part of your proposal, the last proposal, it's going to happen anyway, the intersections.
So
There's a part of your 70 million.
the application, according to his team in the science, that is definitely a much safer option for what is existing there.
So that's always going to be a part of your original plan of the mall, having that done as well.
Yeah.
So effectively, we're doing a sport planning for the front northwest precinct.
Yep.
I think if you look at the master plan, it sort of looked at that whole thing for the growth. So the future master plan, it incorporated all of this about how do we best use all of that land? How do we best use the roading corridors and all of that kind of stuff for good flow of traffic?
Because it'd be a waste to have all that country sitting in car parks.
If we were to redevelop from a somewhat blank canvas is what Charlie's suggesting, we wouldn't do this again where we don't own the buildings, right? So that ultimately we would have a lot more control over the future expansion and development of it without the baggage.
That would be an option for us.
So we own the boat half.
Yeah.
We own 9 in 7A, 7B rateers. We have quite a bit of influence in that sector. Jump to the next slide, please, Wayne. So Benji's Patterson's report is attached to the pack that we sent you guys. It's a really good read. Just got a couple of highlighted points in over here. How GDP can increase 136 million to 466 million. That is a substantial jump. How many more jobs are going to be created and what sort of GFA is required? More GFA, 38,000 square meters. It's a substantial amount of office or whatever.
How many shop square meters have we got in the mall at the moment?
I couldn't answer that question.
How much real estate you make?
So that's out on the mall proposal as you showed us in the last thing, not anything new in the precinct. I go into Wally's point of view that if you went anywhere, once you're tied there, you've got to go into the Northwest precinct. Because you can't go anywhere else.
It's the corner of Waianga and Barry as well. I think I'm well and truly up for a discussion on putting the civic facilities on that corner. Or to move past that, I'm keen to go back to it. I'm actually keen to just leave them all. If we can fix the verandas, just leave them all as is. Because for the most part, it's not.
When you say fix the verandas, I'm interested to get your opinion on that. We don't own the verandas, the private owners do. So we have no influence to actually say to them, you have to fix your verandas.
Where do we get to with the design guidelines for people to fix their
So
own
we've
verandas?
got them, and as part of this process, we would like to adopt them, send them out to the private owners.
We get to 90% done or?
No, it's 100% done. We just go to the next slide and I'll, go to the next slide and I'll show you guys something quickly.
And go.
The next one.
You're going forward or back, Gareth?
Next slide. I want to get to our learning. Next one. Next one. Right. We didn't have, David mentioned this, we never had a North Star. Right? We had no purpose. So this was our team, and that's where we ended up stopping. Right? Because we had no purpose in North Star, we had someone come in and interject, and we ended up going off things and then going down another path. And you can see it was the road to nowhere. So we didn't even have, we're going nowhere. That's what we're trying to say. So we really need the direction and the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, and then we will get a tangible result. I think I can confidently say that I'm someone who pushes for tangible outcomes, and the Memorial Hall testament to that. Sorry, the facility by the lake is testament. It's not named.
Slash rough.
So, and like that Paul, it was 23 years in the making. This project was started in 2008. We actually need to workshop this. We need the purpose, we need the direction, and then that'll give us some ammo to move forward and get some traction.
I think a big learning is, while we've got to have a North Star, which is 50 years out, say, we've got to have bite-sized pieces that get us through long-term plans, because nothing happens if it's not in a long-term plan. So we need to go long-term plan at a time to get something tangible each time.
Yeah.
So what this board needs to consider is what's under your control. So we own the land, whatever land we're talking about, and the civic facilities or the anchor buildings are under our control. So that's, you can directly influence that and help the team steer to whatever direction it is. The rest of it, we need to start winding it back and actually bring in private sector and have good conversations in a positive manner, working together to get a positive outcome. Because I reckon there's been some bad comments about some of those building owners, but they're astute businessmen, right? They did well to invest in those businesses, and they might not be getting high-end rentals at the moment, but they're still getting rentals. And they've still done really well for themselves. We need them to be sitting in the same room and having a good discussion so we can actually move this thing forward.
That hasn't happened till now, though, has it?
No, we've had isolated pockets of discussion. So, and I think that's where we missed our steps. We probably needed the board and the council around with the private sectors and the council staff facilitating those sessions to get a positive outcome. That's what we need.
I'm going back just sort of 3 slides, just to add to, just around that sort of economic evolution of One More Way. I guess when this mall was built, and we had to show all of our age here, but like online shopping wasn't really a thing. You didn't have like courier drivers coming to pick up packages every day. You didn't have people just stopping in to grab a quick coffee and, you know, a scone and stuff. That wasn't sort of how we lived. It was definitely built for a time. And I think somebody mentioned, like, how do you make this scalable and adaptable and evolve with, you know, where things are going? And got sort of that. We've got an economic development team who have, you know, done a report with, which is online with Benji Patterson around, you know, the changing look of Central Otago and the changing aspects of how we do everything and the growth of our population. And, you know, we've seen, you know, the massive expansion that has happened in Cromwell and throughout Central Otago, and also, I guess, the ring of the growth of Queenstown and Wanaka and people using that in a really different way as well. And I guess, to Charlie's point, is make sure that we're creating a space that we're able to just create an inspirational space that those businesses want to come back into, and they'll come back in, you know, where there is the demand and people want to drive through and stop before they do head into Queenstown and grab, you know, your beer, or you pop into the library or do something before you step in there.
And that's where, yeah, just to add to that, where I think his point's bang on. It's got to be visible from the state highway. And so I, sitting here, you know, reasonably new to this conversation, I lean towards West Precinct to focus your attention. The wayfinding, parking, basically what he said.
Yep.
And the fact you control a lot of it at the moment.
The other thing that needs to happen is there needs to be an alternative site found for the people who are travelling through to Queenstown and Wanaka that carpool and dump their cars in the mall.
Long-term parking.
Yeah.
It's a common thing now too, right? Just carpooling. Back in the day, everyone had a V8 Falcon and it wouldn't matter too much, where now everyone jumps in a, you know, a shared Tesla or something. You know? So
what were your thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, I've always thought that the Northwest Precinct was the, you know, the way to go. But if you're looking at a private public partnership, as the mall is at the moment, is that going to be attractive enough to, you know, to bring in some investment? I mean, people are going to look at it and think, what the hell would I want to be involved in that for?
I think you'd find that there is a huge amount of enthusiasm for investment in Cromwell, because it's more accessible than.
In Cromwell, yes, but in that location?
No, not in the mall.
Yeah.
Not in the mall.
There's even
It's coming. There is.
But if you were,
So you're saying there's commercial appetite for the mall area?
Area, not necessarily specific shops in the mall, because as Gareth says, the way we retail has changed.
But if that were possible, if you could do that, if you could get a private public partnership there, would that not entice the people in the mall to perhaps bring their you know, their own premises up to standard?
Discussions we've had.
I'm just going to say something now. So we're building the new facility by the Lake/River.
Getting better this is.
Working on that's the Catalyst project. We have investors sniffing around the edges, big investors. They want to get their teeth into Cromwell. So we're talking about this, and we're talking about ratepayers' money and all that other stuff. There's potentially a deal to be made with investors that won't cost us a cent. Still get our outcomes.
Inside the existing mall footprint, or
Even Northwest inside the whole shebang. Right?
any of it?
In the mall, that's the question.
Okay, so you should know by now that you just have to say, because people aren't.
Tracy, we're ready.
I actually completely agree with Charlie, but what I'm going to say is I want to go one step further. Don't look so surprised, Charlie. I agree, in Central, that whole structure of driving and stopping, but there's a massive piece of land in there, incorporate the West Precinct and all that. And I'm going to say this out loud, and I probably will get stabbed by someone later on, but what they've done in Dunedin with that one-way driving, if you had a series of, a big, where there's parking, there's all the, there's one-way street coming in and out. You can get in, you can do your parking, you can get out if you want to. Last year I went to Manawa Bay and just outside of the Auckland Airport, drove into the car park. We had to queue to get into the car park, got one park, and I said, I'm not getting out. So I don't think the mall as a structure, whatever you want to call it, is going to be a draw card. I absolutely think we need to return to actually take the private sector with us at that 100%, but you could design something really, really cool that's got a roadway that fits everything, that's got cut throughs for pedestrians where you can have cafes, and so you've got open space, you've got the visibility, you've got your anchor tenant. Yeah, that it could be seriously cool. Just I dare I say it, I agree with the public perception of bowling the mall.
I was in the camp, old chappie who was saying cabbage balls twice is never any good. Cabbage ball twice is never any good. So why try to redevelop the mall when it didn't work in the first place? But if you've got commercial interests in there and you've got your civic role, you've got office space for this organisation and ORC and that, it's two different things. You've got commercial development and then you've got retail and town development. They're two different, you could actually have two different developments here. The space we own, if you could take a commercial entity with you, and that could be the ORC, it could be government, could be anything. There is a commercial opportunity in the land we own. Yeah. But go back to farming, if you don't spray your lucerne and it's all covered in barley grass, when you go to sell your hay, no one wants to buy it. So if the mall doesn't get developed, those guys have got to develop or do something, and that's where the joint venture between us and them or us and someone else may come along. Because we're in it for 100 years.
Yep.
We're not only in it for the next 3 weeks.
Also in it for the people that voted for us, and they want a bloody mall. And this
No, they don't want a mall.
Sorry, they want whatever you want to call it, but I agree with you.
They want a new shop. Town centre.
I think actually captured. They want an invigorated town centre, and that does not mean a square box. It means something that actually brings people to it. And
Anna's got a question as well. Go, Anna.
Sorry, I've listened very carefully to what everybody's saying, and I know discussions that I've had informally about what we do next and what we own and what we can influence. There's lots of barriers to making the existing space a usable space, and we've talked through a lot of those and which bits are successful and which bits aren't, and why, and what the costs are of purchasing buildings and working alongside the current building owners to make something better in that space. But you're always trying, it's a really hard thing to do, which is where we got to the last times we were having these conversations, and the amount of money that was being spoken about to dress up what we currently have. The talk about the Northwest Precinct or the talk about how we develop maybe the bow tie, the big fruit reserve. Those are all things that I think that the current board and the last board had all been thinking, give us an opportunity to develop bits of land that we currently own and buildings that we currently own. Yep, the questions of what happens with our civic buildings and our library, those are really important, and thinking about where they go next is one part of this puzzle. But the other part is absolutely what all of you are saying. How do you pull people off that highway to come in and realise that Cromwell's got something more to offer than having your photo taken at the Big Fruit? And we recognise the issues with the roading layout and some of those things, but all of these ideas about how can we do something and maximise the impact without it being about the existing space. I don't know if we're ever going to have a retail space unless we can do something that brings in major retailers like 5 Mile has, like 3 Parks has, and we haven't got the scope in this space to do that. But we could have a vibrant cafe, restaurant, bar, quirky little shop space, and that still brings people in, or a commercial space, spaces where there's lots of those things happening. I think that the focus in my mind needs to be, as Charlie said, as Tracy said, on that northwest precinct and on what we can influence and make the biggest impact with. So I agree completely with what's being said around the table.
Do you think the first aspect of that to bring back is going to be talking through what that realignment of the roads? Right?
Yeah. And I think
the first piece of the puzzle.
Summation of the conversation that has happened here, it's kind of given us some pretty good guidance on what that would have looked like.
And I think we're probably going to need more workshops on this, especially in the face of this huge amount of reform and what simplifying local government is going to look like in the future. So I think rather than bring us necessarily decision-making points, although there might be, depending on how long-term plan stuff lines up with our NZTA funding, whether there's a need to move a bit more quickly on that if there is an appetite, because those intersections are all dodgy, super dodgy. Yeah. Even if we were doing nothing in the mall, something needs to be done about those. So.
I think that if you were to remove some of the outlet shops, Cromwell, I think that would be a great tool card.
Some places it's worked and some places it hasn't worked. And I think there is a bit of a realization that if you're talking about getting, you know, the big box retailers, which is what 5 Mile and 3 Parks had, are we actually looking to compete with the big box retailers? Do we need more, you know, mountain outdoors and warehousey shops and warehouse stationery? Or do we need to have something that is a different offering that brings people to come and to stay and to spend, as opposed to just want to whip in and get a bargain from IKEA?
You still need a draw card business to be amongst it.
You do, but I don't know that it needs to be a big box retailer. It could be a hotel. It could be, you know, like Anna says, a thriving, you know, bar and restaurant scene, because nowhere really has that.
Mm.
Is there anyone around the table with a quite allergic reaction to the way that this is going at the moment? Is there anyone with a counterfactual opinion to this, or are we all largely on the same page?
I think the fact that this has been kicking around since 2008 shows that there's an appetite for something of some sort.
Best it can be.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. You can visit anytime.
Yeah, then you'll get your little lambs daycare centre as well, mate.
I think
Stay in our hotels too. Bring the family.
it is important though that it's done properly.
Yeah, if you have what Stu said with the 100-year thing, and I've said 50 years with the stay in the mall.
We always do 50.
Yeah, but you don't want to end up sinking money into the inside of the existing mall, and then it's at capacity, even if they do try to build up. And then we create something in Northwest, we end up with 2.
Yeah.
And then
Look,
it's split.
So I just want to say one thing. You can design to your heart's content and build something that you think is state of the art and future-proofed for Halangon. In 10 years' time, you go, we didn't build it bigger or whatever, right? Because you just never know exactly. I mean, we can put a lot of science behind that. So I don't think, and I'm not trying to say you guys are scared. I'm saying don't be scared to make that decision, to put that step forward, because ultimately it's usually the right decision. And then going forward, you tend to outgrow it regardless, right? But we have an opportunity to get it right. So I mean, we don't have opinions. We want you guys to have that opinion.
I'm in South Africa.
It's a little opinion.
I think what Gareth's trying to say is like that we've got the science, but let's not forget the art side as well.
Yeah.
And if we go to the last slides, Wayne, please, we put just a couple of maybe sort of semi-talking points up.
We don't need any.
Hey, can I just add something to that conversation about whether we get outlets or big box? Because there does need to, or whether if we build something out there, then what's already there, you know, how's that all going to work? Do we end up with too much space? I really feel like if we build something that has the multiple uses that we're talking about, that maybe there's some accommodation, some retail, some office space, then you've got more people using all of those spaces and walking through those spaces, not just driving to them, which should create footfall in the existing spaces and hopefully be a catalyst to it being done up. That would be my hope.
It's called impulse buying.
Tracy would be good at that.
And actually, do you know what? Where do you get your socks and undies in Cromwell? Exactly.
Father's Day. Father's Day.
Yeah, but where did anyone get their socks and undies these days? They buy them online.
Chinese there, obviously.
Yes.
You know,
Oh, is that when?
they buy
Sorry,
them
not
online.
when.
That's the reality in most places.
There are a lot of gaps. Yeah.
Knows what you're buying.
Time to go home.
Just sort of talking about that and keeping it, you know, front and centre and the commercial community and bringing everybody on the journey. One of the points that we've got up here that we've tried with a few other projects is having a bit of a governance operational joint working group just to keep this working at a fairly good pace, and wanted to have that discussion around that table here. It's something that the Community Board and Council would be keen on. It's something we've done and we're learning on the fly with the Roxburgh Rebuild project, and we've done it with the operations of the Cromwell facility by the Lake River as well. And it seems to have worked quite well, and just keeping things alive and working at pace. It's been quite a good thing to have that conduit between you guys who have been elected by the community and us who need to help bring it to life. And so what would be your thoughts on just having a big group there, the governance operational staffing group? It could be.
Can you bring in other likes of retailer type people who've been involved in developments out there, or even someone like Dunedin, we outside experience other than just us?
We're open to your thoughts.
Because a few names that I thought would be quite good, the sort of local Otago residents that have been involved in property a lot. I mean, because some of those people, that's their gig.
Yep.
And they've been doing it before. I mean, there's a lot.
Sorry, what's the process like? Can we get the architects to design up what the Northwest Precinct is
Yeah,
going to
so
look like?
Probably we need to workshop this more,
Yeah.
and it needs to go back before the community board before it come here for decisions.
Let's get it done.
There are a couple of really big aspects in there that are a real moving feast, including civic facility buildings. I think you need to be really careful with that.
Yeah,
We know there's change coming and it could be really substantial.
Yeah, and your funding to do any of that doesn't start till the next LTP. This was all sort of kicked out. So this is our time to just make sure we get the budgeting right and understand the aspirations and the vision, so that when the 27 LTP comes to life, that there's we have a plan.
When would you sort of start to loosely socialise the idea of it?
We could have done that.
I mean, that's here, but I mean,
Well, it came round last time in the long-term plan, and our community have said, pockets of our community have had really vocal opinions about the quality and the suitability of that mall now and into the future. And I think we've seen it all a lot online and in the local papers about what they think should happen. But the reality is we don't own it, but we do own a lot of the rest of that piece of that big chunk of that you create between those four roads. The vast majority of the land surface is owned by us because all those car parks are ours. Yeah. Got the Northwest Precinct. We've got all that grass and stuff around where our civic buildings are. Got all the Big Fruit Reserve. We have a lot of control in that space.
At our fingertips.
How far down, close to the swimming pool are we in?
Really got to see good, isn't it?
All of that Rose Garden Towers as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Is there anything else anyone wants to cut? I think we've got some pretty good direction yesterday, and actually a regular workshop on this. You know, if we aim for when we are having workshops just keeping it bubbling away, even if they were short ones.
Just to stop us cycling around and relitigating the same decision over and over and over again, can we draw a line in the sand? It sounds like everyone is interested in the Northwest Precinct, so shouldn't we just?
We can't make any decisions
Yeah,
today.
this is a workshop.
Because we're in a workshop, we can't say we want to investigate this or that.
Right.
We can give a bit of a steer and then it will come back to the board
Yeah.
and then it will come to council with the board's thoughts and notes and recommendations.
Understood.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But
So
to
we've
your
got
point before, Mike, before we get consultants involved and draw up something, I think we need to be really clear on their scope, because it's really easy just to say, go away and amaze us, but then we don't like what they come back with. It's not their fault if we don't give them some scope to work within.
Well, and I think we want to be really clear about what we're wanting to achieve, because
Yeah.
we've already spent quite a lot of money drawing up a whole heap of plans for something that we're now saying, well, we're not 100% sure on that. So I think it is really important to be clear, and we've had some good practice at this. This is not my laminated version, but this is the nice new version. Just really setting that, what are we wanting to achieve? What are we wanting the outcome to be? And then we'll be able to set our mission on the
Across
next
the
day.
district, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not been Cromwell.
Be shopping in Cromwell.
Do you want to name it?
I'm just saying that the rest of the community has been funding the development work of it, not just the Cromwell Community Board.
Shopping centre by the fruit.
We haven't spent any money yet.
You spent a lot of money. That's right. Got thrown out last time. Up to date. There's big.
Actually, the Cromwell, because property is only recently has been districtised, it has been funded by Cromwell so far.
So shut your
That's good.
widget right now.
Just for clarity.
There has been significant money spent.
The big-
And other
And the big-
consultants that we did have the last time, are they still on the paycheck or are they gone?
So no, so we engaged JazzMax to do this project. We have not just established that engagement. They are still
They're
engaged.
the Aussie ones. JazzMax, not the
I
Australian.
know they
JazzMax are
Christchurch. They're from Christchurch.
To answer your question, no one's currently working on it.
No, we're not paying any. The project's paused
Oh, yeah, because we made that quite clear when we canned it.
and it is
We
paused.
just fell off.
It was
Very-
very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us online, Anna.
It's very positive.
Is there anything passing, Anna, that you want to say?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for making the time to discuss this. It has been, Cromwell likes to spend a long time deciding on its projects, and this is no different to that. But I think that this workshop's given a really good steer about what the current elected members sitting around the table would like to explore. So let's hope that we're able to have a lot more specificity in the scope of work for anyone coming in with design work, or anyone who moves that work forward, so that we're not around in the weeds as much as we were the last time.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joe, that was yarn.
Can I have 2 minutes with elected members at the end of this, please?
Yeah, on board.
Yeah.